in the previous lesson, I showed you how to create an equation given the zeros, but that was for rational numbers. In this lesson, we're going to be using imaginary and irrational, so it's totally different. But let me quickly remind you, if it's rational, then this is what we did. Rational, by the way, nice numbers like -2, 6, 8, -3. Now let's say, for example, they tell you that the zeros are x equals to 1, x equals to -2, and x equals to 3. To find the zeros, what we did is we made 3 brackets. This was the previous lesson, by the way. And then you said x minus, x minus, x minus. Then you fill in your zeros, so that's 1, -2, and 3. You would then simplify like that. I just changed those two to a positive. And then you would just go ahead and you would multiply out the brackets, and it would give you an answer over here. So we were able to take the zeros, which is like answers. Remember, zeros is just the answers. It's just a weird name that they give it. And we turned it into an equation. But in this lesson, we're going to be looking at imaginary zeros. Now, what's an imaginary zero? What's a zero like this? 4 plus 3i, or 6i, or -5i. Okay? Now, what's an irrational? Well, irrational is when you have a square root that is not a perfect square. So, for example, square root 9, that's 3. So that's rational. That's this one. But what if you have like square root 5? That's not a nice number. Type it on your calculator. You'll see what I mean. It's just got decimals and it's really ugly. So you might get an answer that's like 3 take away square root 2, or square root 5, or 2 plus square root 7, for example. You could even get imaginary and irrational at the same time, like 3 plus square root 2i. So what do we do? What's so different about these ones? Well, all that I want you to do with these ones is I want you to remember the following. Here's the golden rule. If you have a irrational or imaginary zero, add in the conjugate. Okay, so for example, if this is one of the zeros, then add in the conjugate. The conjugate is when you make the imaginary part negative, so you'd go 4 minus 3i, so you would add another one. What's the conjugate of this? Well, you make the imaginary part the opposite. What's the conjugate of this one? Well, that would be positive 5i. What's the conjugate of this? Well, that would just be negative square root 5. What about this one? So you make the square root the opposite, so it'll be 3 plus square root 2. I'm going to leave that one out. What about this one? Well, that would become 2 take away square root 7. And then, for example, this one over here, its conjugate would be 3 take away square root 2i. So the conjugate is just where you change the imaginary part to the opposite sign, or you change the square root to the opposite sign. So, for example, if we start with this one here, how many zeros have they given you? Well, this is 1 0. It's just an imaginary zero. See, there's a comma there. So that's 1. And then here's the second one. So you might think, oh, there's only 2. So you're only going to make 2 brackets. But that's where you'd be wrong. What we just said was that if one of the roots is imaginary or irrational, then you need to add the conjugate. So the conjugate of this one would be the following. And the conjugate of this one would be the following. So all of a sudden, we now have 1, 2, 3, 4 roots, not 2. So we then go make 4 brackets. 4 brackets. Now you can do what we did in the previous lesson with rationals. You say x minus, x minus, x minus, x minus. Now you're just going to go dump all of those in. So I'm going to put this one in a bracket because it's more than one term. So I'm going to do that. Let's make this a bit bigger. Okay, and then I'm going to add in this one over here, but in a bracket because it's more than one term. So minus 2 plus 2i. Then we're going to add in this one, so it's negative 3i. I don't need a bracket for this one because it's only one term. So there I've got 4 brackets now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to neaten up on the inside of this bracket. I don't want this bracket. Okay, I want to get rid of that. And the way that I get rid of that is by putting this negative inside. So that's going to give x plus 2 plus 2i. And then x plus 2 take away 2i. And then x plus 3i, and then x take away 3i. Now, unfortunately, we are going to have to go and multiply all of these brackets together. It's a lot of fun. So what I'll do is I'm going to multiply these two brackets together and then these two brackets. So to multiply these two brackets together, I'll start with this x, and you'll have to multiply it there, there, and there. So that's going to give you x squared plus 2x, take away 2xi. Now we're going to go on to this one, going to there, there, and there. So that's going to give us plus 2x plus 4, take away 4i. And then the next part, this one, and this one. And so that's going to be positive 2xi plus 4i, take away 4i squared. Wow, it's long. Should be 9 terms because it's three terms multiplied by 3 terms. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, good. We haven't left anything out. And then we need to multiply that with this one. So with these, I'm going to FOIL them. So first times first is going to give us x squared. The outers is going to give us negative 3xi. The inners is going to give us 3xi because that's these two. And then the last would be negative 9i squared. Negative 9i squared. Okay, now we're just going to simplify this bracket a little bit further. So there's a x squared. Then for the two x's, it's those two over there, so that's going to become 4x. So plus 4x. And then negative 2xi plus 2xi, those are going to cancel. Okay, so we've used that. And then let's see. Okay, this negative 4i and this positive 4i, they would cancel, so we can take them out. And then what do we still have? Plus 4. And then this part here, remember that I squared is equal to negative 1. So if you have negative 4 multiplied by negative 1, it's actually going to become a plus 4. And so these two can actually just become a plus 8. There we go. And now inside this bracket, this negative 3xi and this positive 3xi, they would cancel. So you end up with x squared minus 9. And then I squared is negative 1. And so now we end up with x squared plus 9, because a negative 9 times a negative 1 becomes a plus 9. Okay, now we need to go and multiply these brackets together. So I'm going to take this x squared, and I'm going to multiply it there and there. So that's going to give us x4 plus 9x squared. And then I'm going to take this 4x and multiply it with those two, plus 36x. And then this one would be 8x squared plus 72. And now we just need to simplify. So if you don't mind, I'm going to write the answer up at the top here. So it's going to have an x4. Then for the x3s, it's going to be just a 4. For the x2s, it's going to be 9 plus 8, which is 17. And then 36. And then 72. Here's our next example. So what you must realize is that this is a irrational zero. So we need to add a conjugate. So the conjugate is when you switch the sign in front of the square root part. There we go. And then this is an imaginary number. So you also need to switch that one. So, so here we go. If you have rational roots, then you can also get imaginary. And then you can also get irrational. And here's, in this column, we're going to say, does it need a conjugate? So in the lesson before this, the video before this, we looked at rational roots. And did they use conjugates? No. So let's say here, no. But as soon as you have an imaginary, then you do need a conjugate. And as soon as you have an irrational, then you do need the conjugate. So this is irrational, and this is imaginary. So we included the conjugate for each one. Okay, so once again, we're going to go make 4 brackets. And then you're just going to say x minus on each one. And now we're just going to fill in these different root or zeros. So this one, because it's 2 terms, I'm going to put it in a bracket. So negative 3 plus square root 7. The next one, negative 3 minus square root 7. Negative 3i and 3i. Okay, now we're just going to go get rid of this little bracket over here. How do we do that? By putting this negative inside. So it's going to become x plus 3, take away square root 7, and then x plus 3 plus square root 7. This will be x plus 3i, and this will be x minus 3i. Right, now we'll go multiply all of this together. So I'm going to multiply these two brackets together. So that's going to be x that needs to then go to this term, and that term. So that's going to give us x squared plus 3x plus square root 7x. Okay, then we move on to the next one, which is this one, and we do the same thing, all three terms. So that's going to be plus 3x plus 9 plus 3 square root 7. And then we do this one, multiplied there, and there. So that's going to be negative square root 7x, negative 3 square root 7, and then negative 7. How do I know that it's 7? Well, if you multiply these two together, do that on your calculator if you want, but it's the square root of 49, but that just becomes 7. Did you know that if you multiply the square root of two numbers that are the same, the answer just becomes the number? And that's what I did there. Okay, so we've multiplied these two brackets together. Now we're going to multiply these two brackets together using FOIL. So first times first would give us x squared. Then the outers would give us negative 3xi. Then the inners would give us positive 3xi. And then the outside would give us negative 9i to the power of 2. Or sorry, the last times the last would give us negative 9i to the power of 2. Now what we're going to do is just simplify. So I'm going to simplify this first bracket. So it'll be x squared. And then this 3x and this 3x would give us... Oh, is there also an x over here? Oh, but this one cancels with that one. Okay, so those two cancel. That's nice. And then we're going to end up with 6x from those two. Okay, and then we're going to have 9 plus square root... Okay, well, let's first put the 9 and the 7 together. The 9 take away 7, which is going to give us 2. So they go together. And then 3 square root 7, take away 3 square root 7. Well, that cancels out, so that's quite nice. And then in this bracket, we know that these two cancel. And then we know that I squared is negative 1. I squared is negative 1. So if you have negative 9 times negative 1, you're going to end up with plus 9, like that. Next step is to just go multiply these two brackets together. So that's going to give us, we're going to have to do it like that. So that's going to give us x4 plus 9x squared plus, now we're going to do this one. So that's going to be 6x cubed plus 54x plus 2x squared plus 18. There we go. Now we just put the like terms together. So that's going to be x4 plus 6x cubed plus 11x squared plus 54x plus 18 is equal to 0. And that's it. So remember, if your roots are either irrational or imaginary, remember the conjugate.